When two security guards tried to block a black Army veteran from his daughter's graduation, no one expected 5 Rangers to rise and silence the entire room without a word. It wasn't about a seat. It was about a man who carried the weight of promises kept through war, loss, and a lifetime of quiet battles. James Carter, a soldier shaped by sacrifice, faced a moment that would test his resolve and reveal the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of conflict. James Carter pulled into the parking lot of Willow Creek High in Atlanta, Georgia, his Ford Mustang gleaming under the golden afternoon sun. The air buzzed with the energy of families gathering, laughter spilling from open car doors, and the distant hum of graduation music. He stepped out, his Army uniform crisp, boots polished to a mirror shine, not for show, but because half measures weren't in his blood. In his hand, a faded photo of his late wife, Lena, cradling their daughter, Maya, as a baby. "I promised you," he whispered, tucking it into his jacket. Every step toward the school carried the weight of that vow, a father's quiet pride mingling with the ache of absence. The crowd parted slightly as he walked, his presence commanding yet humble, a man who knew the cost of every moment like this. Inside Willow Creek High's gymnasium, the air was thick with anticipation, the hum of voices blending with the faint scent of popcorn and polished wood. James Carter navigated the crowded rows, his Army uniform drawing fleeting glances, some warm, others curious, a few lingering too long. He found his seat in the 3rd row, reserved for family, the plastic chair creaking under his steady frame. His hands rested lightly on his lap, the wedding band still glinting on his finger, a quiet tether to Lena's memory. Above, banners gleamed with Class of 2025 in bold silver letters, and the stage buzzed with school officials shuffling notes. James's eyes scanned the line of graduates, searching for Maya, her mother's smile, her father's fire. The room pulsed with life, parents whispering, kids waving signs, a restless energy swirling around him. Yet James sat still, his focus a calm anchor amidst the chaos, every heartbeat tied to the moment his daughter would walk that stage. He didn't notice the stairs, didn't dwell on the weight they carried. All that mattered was the promise he'd kept, the pride that burned steady in his chest, and the photograph pressed against his heart. As the gymnasium swelled with the triumphant strains of pomp and circumstance, the crowd rose, clapping for the graduates filing in. James Carter stood, shoulders squared, his eyes fixed on the stage where Maya would soon appear. The air buzzed with pride, but a subtle shift rippled through the room as 2 security guards, Davis and Reed, moved down the aisle, their steps deliberate, radios crackling softly on their belts. Davis, short and broad, wore a tight frown. Reed, lanky and chewing gum, seemed almost bored. They stopped beside James, their shadows falling over his chair. "Sir," Davis said, voice low but sharp, "this section's for families of seniors. You'll need to move." James turned his head slowly, his gaze steady, unyielding. "This is my seat," he said, pulling the printed ticket from his jacket. "3rd row, family section. Check it." Davis didn't glance at the ticket, his eyes narrowing. "It's full," he insisted, though the row was clearly not. A woman nearby leaned toward her husband, whispering, her brows furrowed. James's voice stayed calm, but firm. "I drove 10 hours to see my daughter graduate. I'm staying right here." Reed shifted, his gum-chewing pausing, caught off guard by the quiet resolve in James's tone. The crowd's applause faded, replaced by a murmur as heads turned, sensing the tension. A few phones tilted upward, their lenses catching the moment. Davis's jaw tightened, his hand brushing the radio on his hip. "Look, don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said, his voice carrying an edge that wasn't about logistics. It was something older, heavier, a weight James had carried in boardrooms, on bases, and in moments too quiet to name. He didn't flinch, his hands resting lightly on his thighs, the faded photo of Lena and Maya pressed against his chest. "You want to tell me who gave that order?" James asked, his words measured, cutting through the noise. The woman beside him, older, with silver hair, leaned over. "Don't let them move you," she whispered, her voice fierce with conviction. James nodded once, his focus returning to the stage, as if the conversation was already over. But Davis's jaw tightened, his hand hovering near the radio, and the air grew thick with the promise of something more. The gymnasium's noise faded, and for a moment, James Carter's mind drifted, pulling him back to a sun-scorched afternoon in Iraq 15 years ago. Dust hung heavy in the air, the horizon glowing red as an IED tore through their convoy, flipping a Humvee like a discarded toy. Metal screamed, and gunfire erupted, sharp and relentless. James, then a sergeant, moved without hesitation, his boots pounding sand as he ducked behind a shattered doorframe. Smoke choked the valley, but he spotted Hank Lawson, blood streaking his temple, pinned behind a burning wreck. "Hank, hold on!" James shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He sprinted across open ground, bullets snapping past, and slid beside Hank, gripping his vest. "You're not staying here," he growled, pulling him to cover. Another ranger, Miles Torres, lay nearby, leg trapped under twisted metal. James's ribs ached, his hands burned, but he braced himself against the wreckage, muscles straining as he lifted just enough for Miles to crawl free. "Move when I move," he ordered, and Hank, wincing, pushed forward, dragging another wounded man. The gunfire didn't stop, but James didn't either. He scanned the ridgeline, spotting two more rangers, Lim and Horton, their faces blackened with ash, rifles ready. They followed his lead, no questions, no doubts. When the dust settled, all five were alive, breathing hard in the silence. James stayed on rear watch, his pulse steady, his eyes scanning for threats until the medevac's roar broke the stillness. He didn't speak of it after, but the men he saved never forgot. They didn't just owe him their lives. They carried a bond forged in moments where loyalty was all that stood between death and survival. Back in the gymnasium, James sat unmoved, his eyes still locked on the stage. The weight of that day in Iraq lingered in his posture, the same quiet strength that held him now. The guards, Davis and Reed, still hovered, their radios crackling, unaware of the history behind the man they challenged. But James didn't need to prove anything. His presence was enough, a testament to promises kept, battles fought, and a father's unwavering resolve to be there for his daughter. The photo of Lena and Maya pressed against his heart, a reminder of why he endured. The gymnasium's air grew heavy, the murmurs of the crowd fading as a faint click echoed from the far door. It opened, and 5 men stepped through, their presence like a ripple across still water. No uniforms, no badges, just steady strides and eyes that carried the weight of battles fought far from this polished floor. Hank Lawson led, his black coat catching the gym's dim light, his jaw set with quiet purpose. Miles Torres followed, broad-shouldered, his gaze scanning the room like a hawk. One by one, 3 others entered, each taking a different spot. Some in the aisle, others near the bleachers, moving not as a group but with a shared instinct, a rhythm born in chaos. The crowd noticed, heads turning, whispers falling silent. James Carter didn't look back. He didn't need to. His focus stayed on the stage, where Maya stood among the graduates, but the corner of his mouth twitched, a flicker of recognition. These were his men, bound by a debt paid in blood and trust. The guards, Davis and Reed, froze, their earlier confidence unraveling. Davis's hand hovered near his radio, but his eyes darted between the newcomers, sensing something he couldn't name. Reed's gum-chewing slowed, his casual air replaced by unease. A woman in the 4th row clutched her program tighter, her breath catching as she watched. A teenager's phone tilted, capturing the shift in the room's pulse. No one spoke, but the silence was deafening, a force that pressed against every corner of the gymnasium. The Rangers didn't posture or shout. They simply stood, their presence a wall of loyalty that needed no explanation. A teacher, Mrs. Harris, stood abruptly, her voice trembling as she called out, "Please, everyone, focus on the ceremony." Her words, meant to calm, only drew more eyes to the third row, where James sat, unmoved, his hands steady, the photo of Lena and Maya warm against his chest. The guards exchanged a glance, their authority crumbling under the weight of something far greater than their badges. Hank's eyes locked on Davis, not with anger but with a calm that carried the promise of consequence. The other Rangers spread out, their positions deliberate, their silence louder than any command. The air felt charged, not with fear but with respect, a current that ran through every onlooker. A man in the bleachers leaned forward, his eyes wide, sensing history unfolding in the ordinary chaos of a high school graduation. James's posture never wavered, his gaze fixed on the stage, but inside, a switch clicked, a steadiness forged in moments where survival hung on trust. The crowd's attention split, torn between the ceremony and the quiet standoff, as the Rangers' presence reshaped the room, a testament to bonds that time and distance couldn't break. The gymnasium held its breath, the weight of 5 Rangers' presence pressing against the air like a storm about to break. Hank Lawson's voice cut through, clear and controlled, not loud but heavy enough to silence the murmurs. "What's the reason this man's being bothered?" he asked, his eyes locked on Davis, the shorter guard, whose hand still hovered near his radio. Davis blinked, caught off guard, his confidence fraying as he glanced at Reed, who stood frozen, his gum chewing stopped cold. "We've got this under control," Reed stammered, but his voice lacked conviction, dwarfed by the quiet authority of the man before him. Hank stepped closer, his black coat shifting slightly, his posture a reminder of battles fought in places these guards could only imagine. "No," Hank said, sharper now. "You don't." Across the room, another Ranger, Miles Torres, rose from the bleachers, his broad frame casting a long shadow. Then another stood, and another, their movements deliberate, no words needed. Their silence was louder than any shout, a force that filled the space with unspoken loyalty. James Carter sat still, his eyes fixed on the stage, as if the confrontation were a distant hum, his focus anchored to Maya's moment. But the guards felt the shift. Davis's hand dropped from his radio, his face flushed, not with anger but with the dawning realization he was outmatched. Reed glanced toward a third guard, Cole, standing near the back, his badge glinting faintly under the gym's lights. Cole, a former soldier himself, met Reed's gaze but didn't move, his jaw tight, his eyes clouded with something unspoken. He'd served, knew the weight of loyalty, but today he stood bound by a different chain. His job, his orders, a choice that wasn't a choice. The crowd sensed it too, their whispers fading into a tense hush. A woman in the 4th row clutched her program, her eyes darting between James and the Rangers. A teenager's phone tilted higher, recording the moment that felt bigger than the ceremony itself. Hank spoke again, his voice low, final. "You're embarrassing yourselves. Step back or this goes somewhere you don't want." Davis's nostrils flared, but he took a half step back, his ego bruised but his instincts screaming to retreat. Reed followed, his earlier bravado gone, replaced by a nervous shuffle. A school official, her walkie-talkie crackling, appeared at the aisle's edge, whispering urgently to the guards. Whatever she said, it was enough. Davis muttered something under his breath, then turned, his boots scuffing the floor as he and Reed walked toward the back exit, heads low, avoiding every gaze. Cole lingered a moment longer, his eyes flickering toward James, a shadow of regret passing over his face before he turned away. The Rangers didn't move, their presence a steady pulse in the room, a silent vow to the man who'd once carried them through fire. James exhaled slowly, his hands still resting on his thighs, the photo of Lena and Maya warm against his chest. The stage lights flickered, and the announcer's voice called another name, but the room's heart was elsewhere, caught in the quiet triumph of a man who'd never needed to raise his voice to be heard. The gymnasium's tension dissolved into a swelling tide of anticipation as the announcer's voice echoed, clear and deliberate, above the hum of the crowd. "Maya Carter." The name rang out, and the room erupted, a wave of applause rolling through the rows, louder, deeper than for any name before. It wasn't just for Maya. It was for the man who sat unwavering in the third row, his army uniform a quiet testament to battles fought and promises kept. James Carter leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on his daughter as she stepped onto the stage, her black robe swaying, the red and white honor cords catching the light. Maya's face, so much like her mother Lena's, broke into a smile, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found her father. James didn't wave, didn't stand. He met her gaze with a nod, the smallest gesture carrying a lifetime of pride. The 5 Rangers, still standing, raised their hands in unison, their claps deliberate, powerful, a rhythm that cut through the chaos like a heartbeat. Hank Lawson's broad hands met with force. Miles Torres's eyes gleamed with respect, and the others joined, their applause a silent salute not just to Maya, but to the man who'd led them through fire. The crowd followed, parents who'd been silent now clapping hard, some standing, others wiping their eyes, moved by something they couldn't fully name. A child in the bleachers pointed, whispering to her mother, and an older man lowered his camera, too caught in the moment to record it. Maya walked across the stage, her steps steady, chin high, her heart pounding not with nerves but with a fire she'd inherited from her father. She shook the principal's hand, her diploma folder cool against her palm, and turned to face the audience. Her eyes locked on James again, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just them. Father and daughter, bound by a promise kept through years of loss and quiet strength. The applause didn't fade. It grew, a deep, rolling sound that felt alive, as if the room itself was honoring what it had witnessed. James sat back, his hands still, the photo of Lena and Maya pressed against his chest, its edges worn but its weight eternal. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened, a rare crack in the steel he carried. Maya stepped off the stage, her gown trailing slightly, and the crowd's energy shifted, no longer just about a ceremony but about something deeper. Respect, forged in the face of injustice, and a father's unyielding love. The announcer paused, clearing her throat, sensing the moment's gravity, and the next name came softer, almost an afterthought. The banners above, Class of 2025, swayed gently, but the real story was in the third row, where a man sat, not defiant, not bitter, but present, his silence louder than any cheer. The room would never be the same, and neither would those who'd seen what true strength looked like. Outside the gymnasium, the Atlanta sun dipped low, casting a warm golden glow across the parking lot of Willow Creek High. James Carter and his daughter Maya stood beside the Ford Mustang, its faded paint catching the light like a memory. Maya's graduation gown hung half unzipped, her diploma folder clutched in one hand, her eyes still bright from the stage. "Dad," she said, her voice soft but edged with fire. "I saw them try to push you out. I was ready to walk off that stage." James placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steady, grounding. "And that's why you didn't," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of years. "You knew I could handle it, and you held your moment like you were meant to." Maya looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her diploma, then met his eyes again. "Those men who stood up, who were they?" James glanced across the lot, where the 5 Rangers lingered near their trucks, their silhouettes sharp against the sunset. "Men I bled with," he said. "Men who know what loyalty means, who show up when it counts." He reached into his jacket, pulling out the worn photo of Lena holding Maya as a baby. "This got me through Iraq, through losing your mom. It's not about strength. It's about what you protect." Maya's eyes softened, a flicker of her mother's warmth in them. "You didn't say a word to those guards," she said. "You just sat there." James's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Sometimes silence says more than shouting, Maya. It's not about proving yourself. It's about knowing who you are." She nodded, her breath catching, the weight of his words settling in her chest. The lot was quieter now, the crowd thinning, but the air felt full, alive with something unspoken. James looked at her, His daughter, now a woman, carrying the fire he'd seen in Lena. "You walked that stage with pride," he said. "No one could take that from you, not today, not ever." Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. "I want to be like you, Dad." James's eyes held hers, steady, unyielding. "You already are." You stood tall up there, grounded, even when the world tried to shake you. The rangers across the lot raised their hands in a quiet gesture, not a wave but a nod of respect. Maya returned it, her chin lifting, a spark of understanding passing between them. The Mustang's door creaked as James opened it, the promise of a long drive home ahead. But for now, they stood together, father and daughter, bound by a moment that was more than a ceremony. It was a legacy. The Ford Mustang rumbled to life, its engine a low growl as James Carter and Maya settled into their seats, the Willow Creek High Gymnasium fading in the rearview mirror. The Atlanta sunset painted the sky in hues of amber and crimson, wrapping the parking lot in a soft, fleeting glow. James tapped the steering wheel, his eyes steady on the road ahead, while Maya leaned back, her diploma resting on her lap, her smile mirroring her mother's. "So," James said, his voice warm, teasing, "Waffle House for dinner?" Maya laughed, the sound bright, cutting through the weight of the day. "Always," she said, her eyes sparkling with the ease of a shared ritual. Across the lot, the 5 rangers climbed into their trucks, their figures sharp against the fading light. Hank Lawson raised a hand, a final gesture of respect, and James nodded back, a silent acknowledgement of bonds that needed no words. The car pulled away, the school's banners and balloons shrinking into the distance, but the moment they'd lived through lingered, etched into the air like a promise kept. This wasn't just about a graduation. It was about standing firm, about carrying yourself with dignity when the world tries to push you aside. James had faced down injustice not with anger but with presence, and Maya had seen it, felt it, learned it. That day, they both understood what strength really meant. Not shouting to be seen, but standing tall when no one's watching. It was a lesson forged in the quiet, in the loyalty of men who'd walked through fire together, in the love of a father who carried a photo through war and loss. As the Mustang rolled onto the highway, the world felt lighter, not because the fight was over, but because they knew who they were. Live with integrity, stand for those who need you, and hold your ground. That's how you leave a mark that lasts. If this story stirred something in you, share it with someone who needs a reminder of what true strength looks like.